Former Mayor of Nairobi, Nathan Kahara, all protocols observed. That's our most famous Kenyan line. We normally say it to mean, I know you're here, but you're not that important for me to say your name. But I don't have the benefit of, I didn't have the benefit of having been here earlier to know exactly who else is here. Neither have I had the benefit of hearing the other speeches. So I will just speak from my heart and from what I think, is why we are here. As introduced, my name is Sakaja Johnson. I'm a young Kenyan who believes in the dream of our continent and our country. I wear several hats in this country. I am Member of Parliament. I chair the party that is in power currently, and hopefully towards the distant future as well. I also chair a caucus of young parliamentarians who are below the age of 35. We are currently 47 of us, both the Senate and the National Assembly. And that caucus is called the Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association. I also chair a committee in Parliament of both Senate and National Assembly of national cohesion and equal opportunities. The reason I'm saying these things is that I think in one way or another they are connected to what we're discussing today. When I was growing up, I always wanted to be a part of something big, to be part of something significant, to make a difference. I do want to be an accountant, and apologies to accountants in the room, or just punching numbers. I wanted to do something significant. I am sure all those careers do something significant, but I always felt a deep void. The stories I had about being a Kenyan, being from the black, dark continent, I felt like it seemed the only heroes we had in our continent were heroes from the past. The great stories of exploits, the great stories of, our forefathers and the great things they did were all in our past. And I kept asking myself, what is the cause for this generation? I believe, really, there's nothing more powerful than a generation that is in tune with its season. Because that's when you change the world. That's when you do things of significance. 50 years ago, most countries in Africa got their independence. Around 50 years ago. I think last year, the AU was celebrating 50 years, which is an average of when most African countries got their independence. And 50 years ago, there was a lot of optimism throughout the continent, throughout the world, indeed, that it's the birth of a new continent. There was a lot of optimism. There were great hopes. If you hear the songs we sing during our public holidays, during Jamhuri Day, it was all about Harambe, Tujenge Pamoja, how our country is going to be great. And we keep hearing stories of other countries that got independence at the same time as we did. And those countries are far ahead of us. Most of them are not in the African continent, but they got independence at the same time. Their GDP was similar to ours. The potential they had was similar to ours. But we ask ourselves what went wrong. A few years ago, I had my first opportunity to leave Africa. I never had that opportunity when I was growing up. And the first place I went to was the Netherlands. And when I was there, I was in shock and in awe of all this great development. Disciplined people who stand at the street and wait for the lights and press the button. I was like, what's going on with these people? Paved roads, society that is taken care of by its government, serious social welfare. Then I kept looking at the monuments they had, the monuments of exploits. It was great men on horses with swords. And I asked myself, what's wrong with us? What went wrong? I remember as an incident when we decided to drive to Germany from the Netherlands, and I was shocked. There was no border control. It was just a sign, you're now in Germany. And we actually crossed two countries. But there was a song that was playing in the vehicle that day. In fact, at that very instance, which for me put everything into perspective. It put everything totally into perspective. The song was by a great man called Bob Marley. I don't listen to reggae. The driver does, and I thank him for having played that song. But the song was a redemption song. Emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And those words kept playing in my mind. And ever since, they've kept playing in my mind. 50 years ago, when we got independence as an African continent, it seems as if we only got physical independence. It is only the visible shackles on our feet and on our hands that were untied. But the mental emancipation of this continent has not happened. I think it is in the process of happening. And I think that is the cause for this generation, that we can break those mental barriers. But the problem is, those who may understand that dynamic and yet again think that that mental emancipation will still be given to us. None but ourselves can free our minds. When I grew up, I had an opportunity once or twice to herd goats. Very few times. I grew up in Nairobi. But whenever I went to the countryside, I had an opportunity to, play around with the kids there and herd goats. And something I noticed is that if you tie a goat to a tree for a number of hours, even if you remove that rope, the goat will never move beyond the circumference of that rope, even without a rope around its neck. And that is what has happened to us as a continent, that we still think that we need the affirmation of the rest of the world, that I am more concerned as a Kenyan politician of what opinion the US or Germany or China has about Kenya than our biggest trading partner, Uganda. That it's more expensive to travel to Nigeria than to London. It's those things that make us ask ourselves difficult questions. I think until we as a continent and we as a people free ourselves in our minds and start creating the stories. This is a brand summit. Start creating those stories. Start creating new heroes. Start thinking about the kind of leaders who can inspire a generation towards greatness. Then we will remain along the same circumference. There are many things that are going on well in the continent. In Kenya, there are many things that are going on well. I would speak about many of them. I would speak about the opportunities for young people. Wamboi has given you her own life's example. And she's a brilliant young lady doing great things for us. I'll tell you about Uwezo Fund. A kitty of money given to young people to do business, the opportunities to get into procurement. I recently sponsored a bill which passed, and I'm very proud of myself. It's the first private members bill in the 11th Parliament, which I sponsored, that gives 30% procurement opportunities from government to young people, to women, and to people with disabilities. This is the point where you clap. And that is a piece of legislation. We're trying to get it done because on paper it sounds good. 210 thereabout billion shillings worth of business to young people. I have another piece of legislation we're working with together with the young parliamentarians on youth employment. There are all these big projects being done. They're good. But I think that is just the hardware. Unless we change the software, which is the attitudes, the perceptions, the mindset, a renewing of our attitude as a continent and as a country, then all these things will just be mechanical and we find ourselves still within that vicious cycle. How do we renew our minds? How do we create that brand? I remember when my first time to go to the States, I was also, as well amazed. But less about the infrastructure and less about the economy, but about the American attitude. Home of the free, land of the brave, or vice versa. Land of the free, home of the brave, actually. And it was a deliberate effort to create that kind of thinking. That if you touch an American anywhere, Uncle Sam is going to find you. that if you don't have a version of democracy fashioned around theirs, you're a backward country. But we all feed on their lifestyle. It is the media, it is the branding. In the 60s, I think, or in the 50s, is when they decided, and very deliberately, to create that brand, to create, movies like Captain America, Superman, yes, to condition people's minds. And I think we might have to do that. You are players in that industry. You need to start conditioning the minds of Africa and start showing our stories. We can complain as much as we want about how CNN only shows a certain side of the continent. But why can't we show our own stories? Why can't we motivate our young people to dream more? Even as we give them the tools, some of which I've mentioned. I think the biggest asset and the greatest thing we can do to them is to help them dream more, to give them opportunities. I think the one thing which is styling about what is going on in our country right now, and in many countries within the continent, is the provision of opportunities. I believe, as a Kenyan, and I might be wrong, I'm a young Kenyan. Sometimes I'm told by my political seniors, and it's difficult for me because they're my political seniors biologically, but not politically. Because I happen to be the boss of old people. And they tell me, young man, you'll grow, those ideas of yours, zitaisha, you'll stop dreaming. And that's what they always tell me. But some of them tell me, you know what? We think your thinking and what you're trying to do to your generation is on the right track. Because unless we actually give our people opportunities, I believe that every person in this country, and this is, it's dangerous to make absolute statements. I think this is an absolute statement. I think we all want the same thing. To go about our lives peacefully, to make something for ourselves, and to provide for our children. A secure future. I don't know if there's something else. That for me is the bare minimum. That is the basic thing. That is why we wake up in the morning. That is why we fight, because of this scarcity mentality that sometimes we've developed as a people that I don't have because they have. That is why we're sometimes competitive to a fault. But at the end of the day, and allow me, especially those who may not be from Kenya, to use a Kenyan example. If a parent, a mother in Turkana knows that her child has the same exact opportunities as a child in Mombasa, will get the same quality of healthcare, the same quality of education, and the same shot at life. I think we'll have peace in this country. We'll have prosperity. There'll be no reason to fight. What are you fighting for? That instead of trying to get my quarter piece of an acre in Nairobi, I can get 100 acres in Isiolo and have the same quality of life. But it's really the opportunity to be something. Sometimes this does not come out well when politicians speak. When I look at many of your faces, I'm seeing more shock than anything else. I dare tell you that even in Kenya and in Africa, I connect with a lot of politicians in the continent. There is a new brand of politics that is coming up, even if it may stumble sometimes. There is a new brand. Politics not filled with insults but encouragement. Not preoccupied with the past but busy about the future. Politics that is not about, putting others down, but bringing others. I see it. But our biggest partners in perpetuating this kind of politics, because I believe that everything rises and falls with leadership, I think our biggest partners must be those of you whose work is to make people think in a certain way, to communicate, people in the media, people in marketing, people in branding. That is what we need to do. So even as I finish, I'm sorry I've said a lot. I hope that the challenge really for us, because that is where my mind is yes, the mechanics are good. They're going on well. There are people who can do that. And it's going on across the country, from Zimbabwe, even, in South Africa and Nigeria. in Kenya, we are finding minerals every day. There's a road in the coast where people realized only recently. They used to wonder, why is this road so black? The road is actually made of manganese. Which, I'm serious. It's the most expensive road in the world. It's made of manganese because that is what they found, just blasting on the surface. Made of manganese. We have so much wealth. I promise you, I'm not. I'm serious. It's in Kilifi County. The most expensive road in the world, made of manganese. One of the most highly sought after minerals. I think today there was an update, or yesterday, about a new block of oil found by Talo Oil. We're talking about coal. In the next 36 months, this government will have increased another 5,000 megawatts of energy from coal, from natural gas, from geothermal, from wind energy. If your bill right now is 1,000 shillings, it will be 470 shillings. And you see, these are not campaign promises, because you will be able to tell before the election date. Yeah? But these things are happening for a reason. But even as they happen, I am more about what is the soul, what is the fabric, what holds us together as a country. In 2007, I think, we were deeply embarrassed and shocked as a country in 2008 that for 40-something years we've been boasting, really, an island of peace in a sea of turmoil. But we realize that there is nothing really that holds us together apart from the next election. Unless we create an identity as a Kenyan people. Because ask yourself, why are you a Kenyan? What makes you a Kenyan? Are we just 40 million people who have found ourselves arbitrarily within the same borders and must get along? Is there something? Is it how we speak? Is it because of our tribes? We must create, and deliberately. It must be a deliberate effort. Because you cannot have a vision without an identity. You cannot. So Vision 2030, all those things are good and they must be done. But I think the cause for this generation is really in the mind. It's in those things like identity and purpose and vision. It is in our collective esteem as a people, as a country, and as a continent. And I believe we need freedom fighters to fight that war. Because it's a war. The most difficult war you'll ever fight is the war in the mind. But it's a war. We need new Jomo Kenyattas. We need new Dr. Njoroge Mungais. We need Nelson Mandelas, who will be able to show and inspire this generation to greatness. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Wow, thank you so much.